Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Style That Binds Us podcast. We are thrilled. We have a very special guest with us today, Mark Happel. He is the director of costumes at the New York City Ballet. Today, we are going to be talking about his career and his new book, which is called New York City Ballet Choreography and Couture. So that is about the fashion, the fall gala at the New York City Ballet. So thank you so much, Mark, for being here.
Of course. It's my pleasure.
Will you start by walking us through your career?
Sure. I moved to New York in about 1978, 79. I came to New York to work on a new Broadway musical that Bob Fosse was putting on called Dancin'. And the shop that was building it was in trouble. They were very far behind. They were looking for people to help. And a friend of mine said, do you want to come to New York and work on this Bob Fosse show? And, it was just like one of those like stories where you pack up the station wagon and drive to New York.
Bob Fosse.
For Bob Fosse. And yes, then 2 weeks later, I found myself standing on the stage of a Broadway theater with Bob Fosse and Willa Kim, the costume designer, and Ann Ranking, and, all of his dancers trying to figure out how we were going to do this. So, as a 23-year-old, it was just like, what? Then just moving quickly, I soon opened my own business, which was called Mark Happel Limited. We did a lot of film, Broadway, off-Broadway dance. After about 12 to 14 years of that, I kind of realized that I wasn't a great businessman and that it was time for someone else to do the business and for me just to create. So I closed down Mark Happel Limited. It was also a time when the city was not supporting small businesses in a great way, so we didn't get a lot of support. And so I went to work at Barbara Matera Limited, which was an amazing, very established, very famous costume shop led by the famous Barbara Matera, she's now gone, but who was probably one of the best costume makers in the world. I learned an amazing amount there. Incredible place to work. Worked on wonderful projects right and left. And it was also the kind of place where, it was very exciting because you could walk through, it was a tiny little lobby, and you could walk through the lobby to go to a fitting room. And I remember one day walking through the lobby, and there was Liza Minnelli, Joel Grey, and Kathleen Battle were standing in the lobby just chatting. So it was that kind of place. It was very exciting. I then, after 9/11, when Barbara died, she died soon after 9/11. And it's always the kind of thing where when the person whose name is on the door passes away, an energy also passes with them. And I did not find it the place I wanted to be anymore. And then quickly, the Metropolitan Opera called me and asked me if I'd be interested in coming to work there. So I jumped at that and worked at the Metropolitan for a while. It was a whole nother beast. I mean, it's an amazing place to work, but it is an incredible place that kind of, in some ways, drains you in a lot of ways. And I found it exhausting and overwhelming, and just at the point that I was getting to be, thinking I needed to maybe look farther, New York City Ballet called. And the director of costumes was moving on, and they were looking for someone to replace her. And I, after about 3 weeks of interviews, jumped across the plaza to New York City Ballet at the then State Theater. And that was in 2006. So that was about 18 years ago now. So, and I can't believe I've been here for 18 years. So that's where we are now. That's where I am now.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yes. Such an inspiring career, my goodness. Thank you
Yes,
for walking us
definitely.
through that.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. And
Sure.
1978 was the time when I came to New York to go to School of American Ballet. So
Oh,
we were
really?
planning at the same time.
Right. I was very downtown. You were very uptown.
Right. Yeah, very exciting.
Yes, and Mom experienced that blackout in the summer. Were you there for the?
I was, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that was so
Yes.
crazy. Right? Remember
Yeah.
that? My mother was in Birmingham, Alabama, and no one could get in touch with anybody. So she walked our dog all night. Meanwhile, we're out all around Lincoln Center. All the restaurants were handing out free drinks and free food.
Right.
It was so
Right.
much fun. It was so exciting.
Yeah.
But I had Lincoln Center in one of the theaters when the lights went out.
Oh, really? Wow.
In LA. Yeah, they made us. They didn't want to
Yeah,
tell
that
us.
was that was crazy.
It was so crazy. Right.
Yeah.
We could talk about that all day. Okay. So we have a lot to talk about, I know. Tell us why you decided to write this book.
I felt that it was important after going through 10 years of working with all these designers and creating all these costumes that it was time to record what we had done, what the shop here had done, which is so important. And after working with almost 30 world-class designers, it just seemed like it was time to put that into a book. I also felt that we had created a lot of costumes that maybe we don't know whether they'll ever be seen again. Sometimes ballets are successful, sometimes they aren't. And when they aren't, they usually go away and the costumes are never seen again. And we did build some incredible costumes. And I also felt like I wanted to do something where the general public could see these costumes up close, because that's often the case. Is that in a theater you're 60, 70 feet away, and you don't see the details, you don't see the workmanship that's gone into them.
Right.
And also, I felt like it was something I wanted to have photographs taken that you could actually study and look at these costumes.
Right.
So.
And it was such an interesting collaboration between designers and choreographers and you. And for people that love fashion, it's interesting. For people that love the ballet, it's interesting. For the choreographers,
Right.
for the dancers themselves, the designers themselves, to be able to see their clothes being used in motion. So many things. I wish I would do an exhibit. That should be the next part after the book comes out.
Well, we already have. That was done. That was done several years ago. Before the pandemic, Lexus had a space down on 14th Street, and it was a restaurant and an exhibit area. And we were the second show, I think, where they invited me to bring down and to create an exhibit of the clothes from the fall fashion galas.
Fabulous.
So I can send you a link to that if you'd like to see photographs of it.
Great. Sure.
Please
Yeah.
do. Yes. Oh, good. Okay. And then we're going in the show notes. We'll send a link to the book. It would be a great gift for holiday.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a phenomenal. We'll keep it on the gift guide, Mark.
Yes. And it has the perfect red cover. So
Yes,
there you
it
go.
does.
It does. So, what do you want to say?
No, I'm just thinking how pretty the book is.
It is magnificent. So, will you walk us through putting the book together? What was important for you that were some musts to include?
Well, I first of all, I approached Rizzoli. A friend of mine had a connection with one of the editors, and he set up a meeting where we met here at the shop. I basically presented the idea to her, and Caitlin Leffel. She then went back to Rizzoli, to Charles Myers, who's the chief editor at Rizzoli USA, and presented it to him. And he thought it was a great idea because Rizzoli very much loves to bring art forms together. So the idea of bringing fashion and dance together was something that they really thought was inspiring. He was very on board with it. And so we moved quickly with Rizzoli into the fact that it was happening. It then took a little bit of time and a little bit of pushing here at City Ballet to get this moving. But finally, I did get the green light 6 days before middle of March when we went into lockdown.
Oh, wow.
So, so we basically closed down for a year and a half here at City Ballet. I went home, not knowing whether this was going to happen or not, and continue to work on it and make mock-ups and do research and that kind of thing. It was important for me that the book include, of course, photography. So I interviewed several photographers, and then finally decided on Pardukovich. He had done a spring campaign of ours, and I'd seen some of that photography and really liked it. So he signed on. That was just before the pandemic as well. And I really, once we came out of it, got the green light again to go ahead. We were moving forward with this. It was very important for me, besides photography, to include costume sketches by all the designers, because that's something that the general public rarely ever sees. Is what is that two-dimensional sketch that three-dimensional costume came from? And it's interesting just to see the variety of sketching that's done. Some of it is very abstract, like Tom Brown's, which, I look at that. Some people look at it and can't figure out what it is. I look at it and it's like I see every costume in that sketch. Yeah. And then some are incredibly descriptive, like Valentino's or, Carolina Herrera's or, Sarah Burton's for Alexander McQueen, where they're very descriptive and you can really see the costume in the sketch. And then beyond that, I really wanted to include a foreword by Sarah Jessica Parker, and then two friends of mine, Tony Goodman, who is a big supporter of New York City Ballet, and then Patricia Mears from FIT, who's a big fashion person. I wanted essays from them. I wrote an intro, of course, and then wanted to include quotes from designers, dancers, and choreographers that would kind of give an insight into the process and what it was like and what fittings were like and so on. So,
yeah, I think that's brilliant. I think that, and all of those pieces needed to be in there for people to understand what it meant to bring these people together. So how did the Fall Gala begin? Did that have to do with Sarah Jessica?
Yes. That's something that she proposed along with Peter Martins, our then director. At that time, the fall fashion shows here in New York had moved to Lincoln Center for that short-lived period of time.
Very short.
And she thought that it was an interesting idea, since they were right next door, to combine designers, fashion designers as costume designers with choreographers, creating new works for our fall fashion galas. So she came to me. Originally the idea, and I've said this many times. Originally, the idea was new up and coming designers, combining them with new choreographers. Well, our first gala was 4 ballets designed by Valentino with, with ballets by Peter Martins and Christopher Wheeldon.
Right.
So,
but then you went to Rosie Azerlin and when
Umberto.
Justin Peck was young and
Right. So, we kind of started high with Valentino, but that was, kind of a magical time. He was incredible to work with and very excited about it. I think it really resonated with him because he was good friends with Peter Martins. He also, having retired, I think that it gave him a new project. It gave him something, exciting to design again. And he was very much a part of it, very much involved. He was here all the time. and he was, I have to say, he was a treat to work with.
Wow. I can only
So,
imagine. Yeah, and he still supports the ballet. I mean, I've seen him at the galas.
right, right. Although I think not doing so well these days, I've heard.
Oh
Yeah.
But
no.
I mean, he is 90 something. So,
Exactly. Right. Well, that's just wonderful. I'm so glad that it all comes together like that.
Yes, so we've had 10 years. So where do you hope the next 10 years of this fall fashion gala go?
I don't know. I mean, there's a part of me that feels like it's kind of played itself out,
Okay.
and I think that in a way it's time for New York City Ballet to, perhaps think of a new angle for their fall galas. I don't know whether that's, whether that's having new music done or bringing in artists or what.
Oh,
I mean, it is. I am constantly being told that the fall fashion gala is a huge moneymaker, which is
right.
what a gala is about.
Right.
So,
That's right. That's exactly.
I think that our fall fashion gala probably makes at least twice as much as the spring gala does.
Sure.
So it is successful. So I don't know. I mean, this last one was an unusual one in that it was not all new.
Right.
In fact, the ballets, none of them were new. I mean, it was glass pieces, which, the original costumes, but then it was Who Cares, which is an existing Balanchine ballet, but redesigned by Wes Gordon.
Right.
So that was a first where we had an existing ballet redesigned by a fashion designer.
Right. Yeah. That's fascinating. That really is. So, how did you work with these designers?
Well, first I was, there was the introduction that happens in the late spring. And either that happens here in New York, if they are here, or if they can get here. They come to the shop, they kind of get the lay of the land. They see that there is a very large shop full of amazing, artisans here ready to build their costumes. I think a lot of times when they first sign on with this, they think that they're going to have to build the costumes in their studios or whatever. And that becomes obvious that they are going to, their clothes are going to be built here.
Right.
We start talking with the choreographer as much as we can about any kind of details I might have. It's a little early at that point, so it's kind of hard because usually you've got the music decided, the choreographer's got some idea of the choreography, where the direction is going to go, what this ballet is going to look like. But we're always kind of, with the fall galas, we're always a little backwards in it, in that we're kind of talking to a fashion designer about something that doesn't exist. And it's a little hard because you don't have the details you'd like to give them. But
Right.
as the process starts going through the summer, the choreographer usually becomes familiar with what music they want to use. That gets passed on to the designer. And then often details like the size of ballet, how many
Right.
people are in it, or how many principals are there, how many demi couples, how many core couples.
Right.
And then also it becomes more obvious then to the choreographer if it's a leotard and tights or unitard ballet, or if they see it being a little more involved, even if it's a tutu ballet, which rarely they have been. But, it just, the details start to kind of develop through the summer, so that when we come back the end of July, basically at that point, I've, over the phone and Zoom and so on, have been able to talk to the designers about what we're going to be doing. They usually have, by that point, end of July, have come up with, preliminary sketches of some kind, fabrics. We start talking about fabric. And sometimes I have to travel to them because they're in Europe and can't get here.
Yeah, that's
And
sad,
so, sorry.
right? To get to go spend time with Dries, Van Noten, etc. That's so
Yeah.
much fun, right?
Yes. So there have been trips to London, Marquise Almeida in London, and then, of course, Dries Van Noten in Antwerp.
Amazing.
And then there was a trip to Paris. There have been those, which,
Yes.
is always a little bit of a perk and is nice to fly to Antwerp to sit in
Right.
Dries Van Noten's office and talk to him about what we're going to do.
Yes.
So
Amazing. Do they speak very much, whatever, with the choreographer themselves, or how does that? Are you the
they
connect?
do. Well, I mean, I am a bit of a connector, but there is more of a conversation directly between choreographer and fashion designer.
Okay.
I mean, they certainly have either email conversations,
Right.
phone,
Right.
Zoom.
Right.
Sometimes they actually get together.
Yeah, that makes sense
So,
because it's a new experience for both, right? The designer learning how to make clothes that move,
right,
and the choreographer having to basically design and not just come to you and you already know what you're going to do, and
right. I mean, a lot of is more for the fashion designer who's sometimes entering into a world that's very unknown to them.
right,
So
exactly,
they might know it and they might have been to see ballets, but
right,
they've never actually
design,
designed clothes for
right,
a ballet company.
right,
So that's that I come into play a lot there, talking about like what kind of fabrics we might be able to use that would be more dancer friendly. I
right.
mean, fortunately, we're finding a lot more fabrics that have stretch in them.
That
So where many times a costume fashion designer will come to me and say they want to use chiffon, I will suggest stretch chiffon, which
yeah,
there's some great versions of that out there.
right,
So there is a lot of that for us to kind
right,
of suggest.
right. Each one of you plays a really important role in making this happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because some of them kind of feel like this is so out of their wheelhouse, probably.
Right. Yeah, and there is also the initial meetings where I kind of have to talk them through a little bit about the differences of designing for runway or for a woman on a red carpet as opposed to designing for dancers that an audience is 50 or 60 feet away. So, and the stage lights and
Right.
just talking about becoming a little more graphic, becoming a little more the small details kind of have to fall to the side because they're not going to be seen.
Right.
And then color, a lot of times talking about what stage lights will do to colors, how they will change them. So,
Fascinating.
there's all of that. There's that little bit of short learning curve there of
Right.
how you have to rethink for the ballet. But then also, I feel like a big part for me is to make sure that even though I am talking them through these things, and I am hoping that they will kind of, compromise their designs a little bit to work for
Mhm.
the stage and stage lights and ballet dancers. At the same time, a big part of my job is to make sure that you don't lose the DNA of Tom
Right.
Brown. I mean, why would you have a ballet designed by Tom Brown if it doesn't look like Tom Brown in the end?
Right.
So,
Yeah. One of the things that I thought um, was a plus about these fashion galas is I remember when we went to the one with Umberto Leon, and he has just this huge fan base, and they all came, and some of them were sitting right in front of us, and they were all cheering, and they were so excited. And I heard them saying, "I had no idea this is what a ballet was like." So I felt like they were, this whole new audience was being introduced
right.
to dance. So I thought that was a really great thing.
Yeah, I mean, that is the one thing that I think one of the pluses about the Fall Fashion Gala is that it has brought in new audiences,
Right.
and it's brought in younger audiences.
Right.
I
Exactly.
mean, certainly the one that we did the year before this last one, which was Gianna Ryson Ballet, that she used Solange,
Oh, well, of course. Yeah.
who wrote music for it, that
Yeah.
brought in a whole new audience.
Sure.
I mean, much more diverse,
Right.
much younger.
Right.
And, you just hope that they continue to come back.
Right.
Oh, right. Exactly. That's the hook. And then you get them
Right.
in.
Right.
I know that the designers have learned so much from you, of course, but is there anything that you've learned from working with all these designers?
I have learned a lot of patience. Um, um, I've also, I think, learned, I've gained an amazing, more respect for these fashion designers and how they work and the teams that work with them. I've also learned a lot about, having a team of people, because many times we are dealing with fashion designers that, our fall fashion gala is a week or two either
Right.
before or after their fall fashion shows.
Right.
So it gets a little hairy at that time, because many times the designers are kind of off limits to me,
Right.
because they are, totally ensconced in their own show.
Right.
And I then become very familiar with their assistants and the team that works with them, so that they're able to continue our process while their shows are happening.
I'd like to know about some of your career highlights, and that can be about these experiences with the gala, but also, throughout.
Career highlights. I think one I have to goes without saying, and that was coming to New York City Ballet, because there are only, there's a small handful of these kind of positions here in New York, much less in the United States. And New York City Ballet is kind of at the top of that list. So, for me to become director of costumes for New York City Ballet was a career highlight.
Sure.
And that has been proven year after year.
Yeah.
Of course, the book, Choreography and Couture, is a career highlight. That it happened at all was something that I still kind of, I'm surprised by, but very much, in awe of everything that went into it. I think, also having my own business in New York City. Coming to New York at a very young age and being precocious enough to think that I was going to open Mark Kappa Limited in New York and then have it be fairly successful for 12 years was, a highlight as well. So, and then, I just think that there are smaller highlights throughout. The people that I've met, the people I've worked with, working on film projects and the like, all of that, really adds up to an amazing, 40 some years here in New York.
Yes. And the book is just exquisite.
Oh, thank you.
It is. The photography, everything from cover to cover.
It is. Mark, what's your favorite part about your job?
I think fittings.
Okay.
I would say, well, actually, probably first would be meeting with designers and talking about what we're going to do. I do love that. I love, collaborating with them, talking with them. Hopefully they're open to suggestions that I have. One of my favorite kind of working relationships is a designer that comes in and really wants to know what I think. And I'm only going to give that as when they ask for it. I'm not. I really don't feel like it's my job to just assume I'm going to tell them what it should be. Right. If they ask, I'm more than happy to talk it through with them, and I love that kind of thing. And then beyond that, I think that it's the fittings that I love. Having our dancers in here, is great. Sometimes watching them react to what the costumes are, it can be incredibly positive, and then sometimes there are the negative ones that you have to talk them through.
Right.
And then, of course, dress rehearsals, when you finally see it all on stage and it's about to open, is a very exciting time, and also kind of a sense of relief that you've gotten this on stage and it's working, and you move forward from there.
It's all just remarkable. So the process of creating new pieces. I know I asked you about some of the pieces, like from Serenade or something like that. The ones that are, the ballet keeps going on and on for years and years. You said you don't necessarily, create new ones until you really need to. Those are on repeat. What about what's the process when you're creating something for a new ballet?
You mean when I'm?
Yes.
Wait.
This is not about the book. This is just about, life. Let's say there's a new ballet. Are you responsible for that?
Well, that depends. I mean, many times the choreographer will come in with a designer that they've worked with a lot,
Oh, I didn't.
and yeah, and they'll come in and they will have either a suggestion of a designer that they would like to work with, or they know one they've worked with for many other projects, and they have a good working relationship, and they would like to see them design their ballet. So that's usually the case. I mean, there are sometimes when a choreographer will come in, and if I know them well, they will ask me if I'd be interested. And of course, I always jump at that.
Sure.
There's also been a couple situations here. Maybe this is a question that you were going to ask about at some point, but there's been a couple situations where the company has decided to take an existing ballet and freshen it up by giving it new costumes. So 2 examples that for me were also career highlights, I have to say. One was Symphony in C, when Peter Martins decided that the costumes should be redesigned, and he asked me to design them. That was an incredible ask for me. I was very flattered. I was a little freaked out. Because this is an iconic ballet. This is one of New York City Ballet's iconic ballets.
Right.
And Peter had decided that he wanted to have it redesigned, and so we talked a lot about it. We talked about the fact that the color palette should stay the same. I felt it was important that it remained black and white.
Yes.
But then we went on from there, and Swarovski became very much a part of that project and a huge supporter. They have been a huge supporter of me and the costume shop here for many years now. And then another one was Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto 2, which was redesigned a few years ago. That was another one that Peter just felt like the costumes had kind of run their course and it needed to be freshened up. And so I redesigned that. And those 2 projects were, I have to say, like I said, career highlights for me, because I felt they were very successful. So, and they continue to get a nice reaction when that curtain goes up.
Yes.
So, which any designer hopes for. When the curtain goes up, if there's applause, that's something you love to hear.
Oh, yes. If you hear those, the gas. When the curtain
Right, exactly.
It's just.
Will you walk us through that process of when you design the costumes?
Well, I mean, it's hard. I mean, many times you're looking at a blank piece of paper, which is kind of one of the most intimidating things that can happen. I did a lot of research for Symphony in C. I did a lot of research on Barbara Korinska and her designs. But then I also looked at a lot of architectural research for that. So, and eventually you start to come up with a kind of um, a, a basic idea in your head, and there's a lot of sketching and a lot of throwing things away and crumpling paper up because it just was like, what was I thinking? Um, with Piano Concerto 2, it was also a lot of research about, you know, when that when that music was written
Ah,
and taking ideas from styles of dress during that period and kind of incorporating them into the design.
yeah.
Um, so it's a lot of trial by error until you finally feel like you come up with something that you can put in front of Peter, and hopefully he will react positively to it.
Right. And I guess you would take into consideration too, like the bodies of the original dancers or in the past, and then what the bodies of the dancers
Right.
currently and how the
Right, because it's all about proportion, and our dances change over the years. I mean, that's something that is really becoming very clear
right.
this season because we have a lot of new male dancers in the core that are incredibly tall. I mean, suddenly we have this whole crop of men that are like 6'3", 6'4", which we haven't had that before. That many. So you have to kind of take all of that into consideration. A lot of our women are also becoming much taller. We have the Miriam Millers and the Emily Kiktas and these taller female dancers that are beautiful.
And when I
But
was there, they were taller. When the black and white photographs were there walking on the way to your costume shop with, Suzanne Farrell and all of that crowd, that's when I was there. And they were pretty much all tall during
uh-huh,
that year.
yeah.
So the
So
bodies
you have to,
change. You know, with time, right? Just depends on.
yes. And then also now, I mean, you also have to take into consideration that there's going to be multiple casts of these ballets. So one night it could be danced by a female dancer that's 5'10", but then the next night it might be danced by a female dancer that's 5'5".
How
So
do you make different costumes
yeah,
for
we make a costume
each
for,
costume? Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Everybody
I
has
mean, especially our principals, I think it's important
right,
to try to make a costume for each principal so they
right.
have their own.
Which I know is fun. Like you've probably worked with Tyler Peck so many times now. You know her. You know how to design
Right,
specifically for her, and
right.
yeah,
And how she's going to react. And
yeah.
she hates sleeves.
Oh, how
So
funny! She's so adorable. I think her personality is so lovely as well as her dancing.
she hates a sleeve.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, will you tell us about some examples of how you've seen dancers transform, how the fashion and the costume allows them to really get into that character that they're dancing?
Well, I think that, I mean, the one thing about most ballets here at City Ballet is there is no story. They're totally abstract.
Yeah,
So, character wise, I mean, they may be, they're going out as a principal female dancer, but there is no real character that they're going out as. It does, I think that what inspires them is, suddenly putting on a costume by Carolina Herrera or, putting on a costume by Giles Deacon. I mean, the Giles Deacon, he's an amazing designer that I worked with and got him back twice, actually, because I do feel like he creates costumes that can give a dancer a feeling of character because he does this amazing he works with so many different periods and he combines them together where he'll combine silhouettes from various periods together in one costume, which I think is always very interesting and does kind of give a dancer a feeling of character in some way, even though there isn't.
right. I feel like with City Ballet, because there's no story, there's more importance in the costume and the music and the dance, and also when they put on a costume, knowing like the people that came before them that wore that,
Right.
throughout the time, since let's say Balanchine or whoever choreographed the original piece and things like that. So the costumes have more of an important role to me.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, sometimes they do. I mean, I think a lot of our audiences, especially I think sometimes the older audiences, and the real ballet audiences
right.
are very much distracted by costumes. I mean, I think that's why our what we call the black and white week, which is the week where we do just black and white leotard ballets, like Fortes and Agon, and are amazing. And people often say to me, well, we like those ballets because they have no costumes, which, of course, then I say to them, well, they do have costumes
Oh,
because
yeah.
someone decided to put them in black and white leotards and tights.
Well, and it's dramatic.
Yeah. But then, I come from a theatrical background. So costumes for me are very important. And I think they can, even though a ballet is abstract, they can, when that curtain goes up, tell you who those people are. I mean, I think Paz de la Hoya is a ballet that when the curtain went up, the costumes designed by Reed and Harriet, Reed Bartlemay and Harriet Young, immediately told you that these dancers were, Southern California beach, that kind of thing. And Humberto is the same thing. I think he can create a situation where it tells you that these people are, young, kind of revolutionaries in a way. I do think it can work for a ballet costumes.
Maybe it's more about the mood, setting a mood instead of
Right.
actually a part of the story.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
very intelligent.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, so Mom got to come, for everyone listening, to spend a summer in high school at School of American Ballet at City Ballet. And Mark, you were so sweet to have us to the shop. So do you want to talk about that experience at all? What that was like for you, getting to go back there?
Amazing. It was. It really, I kind of, burst into tears when I saw some of those photographs in the very beginning. It was such a unexpected experience. But then, you said go down to the 6th floor, and yes, the lobby does look different now and everything, but I saw a class going on, and I was, the black leotard, the pink tights, the hair in the bun, straight across the room, it's very homogenous or whatever, and so clean and so elegant, and so the epitome to me of ballet is nothing messy, and I was so excited to see that this is one place, the place in my mind, but one place where people aren't wearing all kinds of,
Right.
different kinds of leotards and tights and just all kinds of sort of messy stuff. I mean, there's definitely a
Rehearsal wear.
Yeah, and there's a time and a place for that, but it's just, to me, that's when you see that the stark difference in the black leotard and the tights and all of it is just
right.
There's nothing quite.
I mean, that is changing a lot now that they, once they get into the company, because more and more companies across the United States and the world, I think, are becoming much more conscious of diversity and inclusion. So we have started now, like many companies, where it used to be, when you were younger, it was pink tights across the board. I mean, all female dancers wore pink tights. That no longer exists. Unless a ballet is specifically designed with white tights, like diamonds, all our ballets are done in flesh-colored tights. So they're tights that are dyed to the dancer's particular flesh color. So, and we are becoming a company that's including many more dancers of color. So that's becoming important. I mean, there are a lot of people out there. I know the old guard just still really want the pink tights back. They want that kind of uniformity.
But it's, that's for, like, to me, for the class, just to see those students,
Right,
like, you're not in here. We're all doing the same thing and working really hard, and
right,
you're protecting your skill and everything. As far as, and also City Ballet has always been modern. So to me, the flesh tight is fabulous.
right.
Forming,
Yeah,
makes a difference.
yeah.
And certainly people need to be able to express themselves.
It's been a little bit of a bumpy road,
Yeah.
moving into flesh color tights because, many of the dancers, even in the company, don't really like, moving away from pink.
Right.
It just is such a part of being a ballet dancer.
It is. And it looks
So,
like you're not wearing any tights at all.
right.
From the audience.
So, that has been a little bit of a struggle, but I feel like we're kind of moving into a period now that it's the norm. So, it's not such a huge, learning process anymore.
Well, with something like the Nutcracker, is that the case? Or is that, since that's so traditional, is that still the pink tights? Or
No, that's flesh colored.
well, that is interesting.
Yeah. So,
They are changing.
yep,
Yeah. Thank you again so much for letting us come into the costume.
of course.
That was so interesting. And then the woman that actually dyes the fabric to match
Marie. Yeah.
the dancer. I mean, I didn't really realize, that was a thing.
There was that
Right.
whole fact.
Yes.
Yes. So, Mark, will you
Yeah.
take us inside the costume shop a little bit? And also, let's talk Nutcracker. Is that, are you full force into Nutcracker now?
Sure. That dances are back tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Nutcracker rehearsals start up full fledged tomorrow. We start fittings tomorrow right away. Every year, there is usually a large project for Nutcracker that we take care of, whether it be remaking all the flower costumes or, remaking this year, for example, we're remaking all the men's hot chocolate costumes. So, and then beyond that, of course, there's, the smaller projects. We always have pink and green sugar plum, at least 2 or 3 of those. We're also dealing with a lot of the children's costumes in altering them to, to fit the kids.
Sure.
I mean, one thing that we did a few years ago, right after the pandemic, we couldn't have kids. When we were still a little COVID
Wow. Yeah.
concerned here. I mean, we still are, but not quite what it was.
Right.
We couldn't have kids. And don't ask me why now, because I don't really remember, but
I know that was hard. There are a
Maybe
lot
we
of
had to.
Maybe they couldn't be vaccinated or something. There was like a limit.
Yes, that's it. Yes, because they couldn't be vaccinated.
Yeah.
So we had to have kids that were old enough that could be vaccinated. So we had to rebuild all the children's clothes to fit these larger kids. So we have a whole set of costumes, especially for the girls, which are a teenage-sized party dresses. So a lot of those are made, though, at the time so that we could specifically alter them down,
right.
because now we're back to having little kids again. So a lot of that's going on. Hot chocolate is, of course, as I said, we start fittings tomorrow. So, we all work up towards the week of Thanksgiving. When we have dress rehearsals on Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, and then Friday afternoon after Thanksgiving, and then it opens Friday night.
Oh.
So Thanksgiving week is a little bit of a non-holiday for us around here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Gearing up.
So
Exciting. It's so exciting. So will you quickly just walk us through, and they'll see in the video, but the different stations in the shop, the different people who are working in there?
right. Well, we have 2 drapers usually. We have a men's draper, and then we have a women's draper. Right now, we don't really have a women's draper. It's been very hard after the pandemic to find people.
Wow.
So because I have a career of draping, I've kind of been stepping in as that as well.
Wow.
So many times I'm kind of doing two jobs at the same time, which is a little tiring.
Yes,
But
exactly.
yeah. And then we have an amazing team of stitchers, machine operators that also do handwork. I mean, incredible artisans. We have two cutters that basically take, the patterns that have been created by the drapers and cut everything out to be assembled then. And then we have a shopper who does all of our, basically goes out into the world and,
Sure.
finds everything that we might need, both fabric, trim, that kind of thing.
Right.
And then we have a Marie, who is our incredible dyer painter, who is just a magician, and I depend on her so much. And she has her own little kind of dye laboratory back there. And then we have a shop manager who kind of keeps us all running.
That's great.
So,
Well, it's just, I don't know, I think some people might picture it like sort of a dark kind of, old space sort of with all the costumes and everything, but it's so clean and modern and brightly lit and,
right. I mean, that's the one thing we're very lucky here is that we have this wall of windows
right.
that
Right.
look out on the Hudson River.
Yeah.
So, we're very lucky for that because, like you say, many costume shops you go to, I don't know why, but they're often very dark. Even if there's windows, it seems like the windows are usually covered up or
Dirty.
you know,
Yeah, exactly.
so we have these kind of almost floor to ceiling windows that are just fabulous. So
Yes. So fabulous. Okay, we're going to wrap this up, but I was curious. Well, you're probably going to say every day is different, but what does a day in your life look like?
it depends on where we are.
Right.
Some days are about doing research. Some days they're all fittings. Tomorrow's going to be a day of fittings
Right.
with all of our hot chocolate men.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, emailing answers to questions that are coming through. It's a lot of looking at, you can see behind me, it's a lot of looking at old costumes to decide if we're going to rebuild them, how much we can do of it, how we're going to do a process that was done 20 years, 30 years ago,
Right.
was done one way, and maybe we don't have the facilities to do it that way. Or sometimes we have more options, that we can recreate it in a cheaper, quicker way. So I would say that my day is basically always kind of a research day of some kind, whether it's, looking at old costumes, looking at new sketches, fittings on dancers, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What is the difference in costume design and wardrobe at City Ballet?
You mean between the costume shop and the wardrobe department?
Yes, will you tell us about each?
Sure. I mean, that's a lot of times that people don't really realize. The New York City Ballet costume shop basically is here to produce costumes and build new costumes, try to take old costumes and make them more usable by replacing part of them, replacing a skirt, relining a bodice, that kind of thing. It's all about construction, whether it's new or old. Our wardrobe departments, which are amazing, and an incredible wardrobe department, both women's and men's wardrobe departments, are there to keep the shows running. So they take over in the afternoon for dress rehearsals and then running the shows at night and doing any kind of, preparing things for dry cleaning, preparing things for washing, that kind of thing. So they are responsible for the upkeep of the show once we've handed it over to them.
Oh, that's so nice. That you don't have to do both.
Right.
That would be too much.
I don't have to do both. I do have to kind of oversee both, but
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
That's amazing.
At the end of the day, I usually go home.
Thank God. Yeah. Right, but then I'm sure it is. What is it like for you to watch a ballet where you have designed the costumes?
Oh, it's thrilling. I mean, it's it's an amazing thing.
And know the dancers,
Yeah, yeah. So
That's great. Well, we're so excited we got a glimpse inside your world. And where can people find you? Where can they find this fabulous book? I know we're gonna have a link to it and put it in our gift guide and everything else.
Yes.
oh, thank you. I mean, Rizzoli is the place to go. Rizzoli.com.
Great.
Or RizzoliUSA.com, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
We're so proud of you. I know you're excited, and it is.
thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, it's just a really exquisite book. It really is.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for coming on the Style That Binds Us podcast, and we hope to see you soon.
Of course.
Good
It was
luck
my
with that,
pleasure.
Edgar.
Thank you. Thanks. Have a good holiday.
Thank
You too.